Once we create a sketch, we pick our plane to sketch on, and we get some kind of a view, doesn't matter what, but just not straight on. Even for the first one, especially the first one, I like to be here so that way if I'm sketching, I can kind of hold up my part or compare it to my thing and make sure I'm drawing in the same orientation as what I'm drawing. Whether it's exactly the isometric or I turn it just a little bit, but I don't want to look at it straight on because sometimes it'll flip it like that. Now the green line is horizontal instead of vertical, and I go back to home. Now the part's 90 degrees off. And so that's why I don't like to look at. So as I draw things here, so I'm just going to draw a line. So I click a point and I'm moving around. You can see as if I'm close to horizontal, it snaps down to being horizontal. And I get that little symbol below it. That's the horizontal constraint. You can see it kind of matches this symbol right here. If I bring it close to vertical, now I get the vertical one. It's wanting to snap to that orientation. If I pick some other point in here, no, I'm not going to get that. So I'm going to click there. Great. If I move down now, see, it's going to want to snap to horizontal. If I keep coming, now you can see in the corner, there's got the little angle for 90 degrees. It's going to want to snap to 90 degrees. If I hit escape, I have this here. So right now, our sketch is what we call undefined. This line can move wherever. I can grab the line, I can drag it around, I can grab this endpoint, drag it, I can grab this endpoint and drag it. It's free floating in space. I don't know how big this line is. Yes, it does let you put some numbers in while you're drawing it. Don't do that. Just type, because if I put a number in, and now it's not going to move the same way, right? I want to be able to control how it moves before I start telling it how big to be. If you start adding dimensions, then it's going to limit what you can do to it. So never put dimensions in while you're drawing it. Just draw the shape. And then we'll constrain how it moves, and then we'll tell it how big to be. Okay? So this can move around. I have these set of constraints here. I might have something picked. It's gonna gray out the ones I can't do. Like I picked a line, I can't make the line concentric. It's gonna gray it out. I pick a point, I can't make a point equal to something. I can't make a point parallel. It's gonna gray that out. So going through these, we have this first one, which is horizontal and vertical. So that'll turn any line to be horizontal or vertical, and it'll just snap to whatever it's close to right now. I have coincident, which will take 2 points and merge them together, or it'll make a point stay lined up with a line. I have tangent, it makes a line tangent to a circle or an arc. I have equal, makes 2 arcs or circles equal radius to each other, or 2 lines equal length. Oh, vertical and horizontal, I can also pick between 2 points to make them vertical from each other. So like if I do this one, I pick the origin and this endpoint here. Now this one can go up and down, but I can't go side to side. It's locked in a vertical relationship with the origin. If it's here, I can also just drag it to that, and now that adds a coincident. So now it can't move. You can see a coincident runs there now. The same icon. That end of the line is now coincident. It's locked to the origin. If I want to take that away, I can just click on the constraint here, hit delete on the keyboard, and now I can move it around wherever I want. Okay? But notice, so blue line means unconstrained. White dots mean the ends are unconnected. They're not touching anything else. If I grab this point here and drag it down to the origin, what just happened to that dot? Now it's black. Now it's grounded. It's constrained. It can't move. If I tell this line to be vertical, look at it. The entire line turned black, except for the white dot, because I can't move it side to side, but I can move it up and down. So that dot, the end of the line can still move, so it's still white. It's not connected to anything. But the line itself is locked in its orientation to be vertical. If I draw another line from the end of that line over here, you can see that the dot goes away because it's not open anymore, it's connected to something. But if I grab this line, this whole line can move up and down. If I grab that point, the point can move up and down there. So I am clicking and dragging when I'm moving stuff around like this. When I'm drawing, I click and let go, click and let go. If I click and drag, look what happens. I get a tangent arc. Okay? But I can grab this point and drag it around. And so that's a way we test to see what's not constrained. I can see a blue line. Oh, this thing isn't constrained. How can it move? What do I need to do to lock it down? So if I draw like another line from here to here, now no more white dots, because I have a closed shape, and you can see it also shaded in. If you turn off the profile, if you turn off this profile one, then it doesn't shade it in. I like to leave that on. You can click on it, and look in the bottom right corner. What's it say?
One profile.
One profile, and then what?
Gives you the area.
Gives you the area of that profile. So if I make this bigger, now it's going to change that area. If I pick on a line, look what it does. It tells me the length of that line. So this little status thing here will tell you information about whatever you ever picked. If I pick a point, it's just going to be the X, Y, Z coordinates for that point. Not as useful, but the length of a line, the area of a shape, that's good information to have. So as I'm going through, I can kind of horizontal, vertical, coincident, tangent, equal. So equal, that one and that one. Now that point, look, it's always going to be halfway up and down of the part. If I make that go up, the overall is going to go up. If now I add a dimension, so I pick a line, I just come out to the side and click, tell it how big to be, it's there. Why aren't those black yet?
They're not constrained.
How can they move? Grab the point and drag it. So I'm doing this, I can move it that way. I can't move up and down. Can't go up and down, but I can go in and out. So I have two options on how to constrain it. I can either tell it what angle to be, right? Within that, lock it in, because as I'm dragging it, the angle's changing. Or I can tell it how far I want it to be from here to here. There's always more than one option on what you can do to constrain something. How do you decide which one to use? What's important? Is the angle important? Then use the angle. If the distance is important, use the distance. Okay? That's how we decide what's important to this design. What needs to be lined up with something else? What do we want to be able to control later on? There's always a give and take. So that's equal. Parallel just makes two things parallel. Not perpendicular makes things perpendicular. Not a whole lot to it. Midpoint makes things line up at the midpoint. So if let's say, I do want this to be 30 degrees, so that's fully constrained. And for some reason, I wanted to have a rectangle, and I want the middle of this line to be at the end of that. So I use midpoint, pick that line, pick that point. So now that's in there. And I'm just kind of showing you what they work. So I would never put these dimensions on unless I had the entire geometry ready the way I want it to be. But I could also, so if I just pick a line, just pick that line. If I double click a line, it's gonna go around and pick that whole shape. So I'm gonna delete it. Maybe I want it actually in here, I want the midpoint to here to there. I'm kind of drawing like a little letter A kind of thing. So now look, I can pick that area. And if there's solid lines there, it's going to break up the area that I can select. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So midpoints one I use a lot. Collinear means that two lines are going to line up with each other. So if I have a line here, I pick collinear, that line and that line. They are now lined up. Even though they don't touch, they are going to be lined up with each other forever. Symmetric, we don't use, ever. Because I can just mirror my part, right? So I like to keep sketches simple. So when we're making parts, my rule of sketches have to be less than 8 lines total. Preferably less than 6. Preferably as few as possible. I love sketches that have 1 line on them. Because I'm reusing existing geometry and I'm just adding the new thing that I want to make. 1 or 2 lines on a sketch is great. If once you get to 8 lines on a sketch, so 8 lines or arc segments or whatever, it's getting too complex. There's ways to simplify that shape. You can always simplify it. So we'll talk more about that on Friday. For this week, for like today, I just want you to play with some of the adding constraints and things. We have the constraint, and then I have a little exercise for you to do that. Ever go on like Facebook or Instagram, where you see the like geometry problems? They've got like a shape drawn out and dimension that's like find R, find X. You're gonna do a bunch of those, like 10 of them. And you're gonna do them in the sketch though. You're not gonna do the math. Some of those I think you have to have calculus to do.
Yeah.
Because you're like finding areas between a curve and stuff like, I don't know. I never do calculus. But I did all 10 of them in 10 minutes earlier before we started class. Because I know how to use the tools. So this is going to be a little bit so this is going to be on Wednesday for you guys, because I'm not going to be here. I've given you the problem and the answer. So you could say, yeah, I did them all. So, great, but that doesn't really help you. I want you to practice going through them, seeing if you can figure out how to find that answer. And that's basically going to be most of the work for you guys to do on Wednesday. So don't just rush through and see if you can do them like, oh, I didn't get it, I'm just move on. Just like, why? Like talk to each other, get help. Like if you don't understand it, talk to someone else. If they got it, okay, why are we doing this? How did that, is there another way we could do this also? Maybe an easier way with less things or something like that. But still, most of those, like seven lines or arcs that I needed for the whole thing. There's also this one called fix. This is one that we don't use that often. Because it just kind of locks something down. So if I hit fix, I can tell that line to stay where it is. And look, now it's fully constrained. Yay! But I have no idea how big that rectangle is. And so it's not really a good tool. The only reason to use fix is if I was gonna, like I had done I traced something in AutoCAD, I brought it in, I know it's perfect, and I don't want it to move around, then I'll fix it. Or if I've got this sketch going over here, and I'm just doing some layout things, and I want to do something totally unrelated to this over here, but I don't want to make a new sketch, I could do this, and I could fix one corner of it. So now I would kind of add my own new origin over there. I could do that, or I could just finish this sketch, come over here, turn it off, and then make a new sketch. That would be a little bit easier. And so there's always other ways to do things. And so I don't use fix ever, or very rarely, and I never use symmetry. And this one is curvature if you're doing splines, and we'll talk about that later on. But horizontal, vertical, always used. Coincident, almost always used. Tangent, used a ton. Equal, used a ton. Parallel, perpendicular, sometimes. Midpoint, a ton. Concentric, a ton. You want things centered with each other. And collinear is okay. So those are the constraints that we're using when we're making things. Any questions on what those are? And they sound simple, but most people don't know how to use them effectively. Mm-hmm. They start adding dimensions first and then trying to control it that way. But using these helps you to make better models. Yeah. Making things that are going to behave the way you want it. You want to make it bigger, but you want that to stay centered. You want to adjust this, but leave this the same. Having your constraints set up the right way lets you do that. Yeah. And so that's why we're going to spend some time working on these. And so we're going to do that. Also, when we start dimensioning, I've got the video on this already. If I pick dimension, I pick a line, so I pick a line itself, that's always the preference to pick the line. If I come off kind of perpendicular to the line, it's going to give me a dimension of just the length of that line. If I move over more, kind of over here, now it's going to give me the vertical component of that line. If I move over here, it's going to give me the horizontal component of that line. Okay? If I pick 2 points, it's the same thing. I can do horizontal between the points, aligned, the distance straight between them, or vertical. So if I have this line, I'm going to dimension this line, it's a lot easier just to pick the line than it is to pick the 2 points. So just pick the line. If I have 2 lines that are parallel to each other, I can pick those 2 lines, and it's going to give me the distance between those 2 lines. If the lines are not parallel to each other, and I pick them, it's going to give me the angle between those 2 lines. Okay? Make sense? If I pick a line and a point, it's going to give me the distance between the line and the point perpendicular to the line, kind of the shortest distance between that point and that line. So being able to pick, depending on what you want to, how you want to dimension it, being able to pick the right things is also the other piece to this, to create a good sketch. You want to have the geometry constrained, and then pick the right dimensions to do what you want to do. Okay?
Cool.
Any questions on that right now? All right, so we're going to go to lunch. But before we do, I want to show you